Hi, Becky.
Hi.
How are you? Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh my gosh, you're welcome. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. I'm hiding in my car.
Okay. Great. And for those of us joining us here, I just want to give a little introduction for Becky and her credits. So Becky Gulsvig here, she starred as Beverly Bass in the first national tour of Come From Away, which played here in San Francisco in January and February of last year, 2019. And then she played the role on Broadway starting last November. In addition to her touring turn and Come From Away, her credits include Broadway performances in School of Rock, Legally Blonde, which you were in the pre-Broadway engagement here at the Golden Gate Theater in 2007, and a major Broadway debut in Hairspray. And Becky's touring credits include Legally Blonde and Beautiful, the Carole King musical, which you played Cynthia Weil here in the Golden Gate Theater in 2016. So you are no
Yep.
stranger to our San Francisco audiences.
I love San Francisco so much.
That's great, and we love you, and thanks for joining us today.
Of course.
And so, yeah, so I just wanted to start with how are you staying creative during the pandemic? It's been 6 months since we've been staying at home, and what have you been up to?
Well, it was hard at first, of course, because it was such a shock. And I have a daughter who is 9 now. And so there was a lot of at-home learning happening.
Mhm.
And that's a learning curve on many levels. And just taking care of things on that end. So for the first little bit, it wasn't about being creative. It was about surviving.
Yeah, right.
And
Yeah.
the summer, people started to hang out with at least a few people. So we started to get like a little bit of socialization back, which helped. And then once that kind of started, then I really felt afloat as far as creativity goes.
Hmm.
And so by the end of the summer, I knew I needed to do something. And so the reason I'm actually hiding in my car is that I start teaching at 3:30 East Coast time. Because I started a program, a theatrical enrichment program in my town, so that I can go to kids that are already hanging out, and we can wear masks and be outside and sing and dance and play acting games and sort of do the best we can, with what we've got. And
Yeah.
so planning for that and now starting that has definitely fueled my heart.
Yeah.
And given me and hopefully these kids, at least so far, has given them so much joy. So that's been helpful.
Oh, that's really wonderful. And so was this an initiative that you this is your idea to take this on and to start this in your community?
It was,
Oh,
yeah.
great. That's really
There's a
wonderful.
lot of the arts in my community anyway, but I just knew, so many things are starting to pick up,
Mhm.
but yet somehow theater is not.
Right.
And I get it. I get it, safety first. But there are so many people that appreciate live arts and live music, and they need a place to let it out. And especially the kids, they've all been cooped up, and at this point they're all distance learning on screens all day. So if we can get out and bust a move, more power to them.
That's really wonderful. Yeah, it's been great talking to artists and seeing how they've been giving back to their communities, and whether it's a pivot to teaching or sharing what they've learned throughout the career with other people. It's been really great to hear, and so I'm really excited to hear that you're doing that in your community.
Oh, thank you.
And so yes, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your theatrical journey and what you've done in your career. And I want to talk to you first about Come From Away, which we absolutely loved here in San Francisco. And I just want to know, what did you enjoy most about your experience being in the show and getting to play someone like Beverly Bass and working in a really great ensemble piece?
I enjoyed the whole thing. My favorite thing was the whole thing. Top to bottom, inside out. The story, the people, the producers, the company, the roles I got to play, the songs I got to sing. I mean, everything. It was a top-notch experience because it came from the heart. It was a story to be told for the right reasons, and it just was so brilliantly crafted, and it was built on us as a tour with such care. We were so welcomed. It was really just everything I love about theater coming to fruition at a professional level. You get in theater thinking your heart will be full and everything will be a wonderful experience, and there's always little bobbles, and it's a job. So sometimes you get tired, or people are grouchy, or, it is what it is. And not to say that nobody had a grouchy day on Come From Away. And make sure you're being your best self. And it just inspired nothing but kindness in us as a company, and in me. It was such an inspiration and such a wonderful learning experience to share that show.
Yeah, and I think that those themes are really resonated with the audience. Themes about kindness and about hope and community. And I know that Come From Away is such a deeply personal show for many people. And have you had many memorable interactions with people who came and saw the show and maybe talked to you at the stage door? People that saw the show, what was the reactions from the audience like for you?
The reactions are always wonderful. And that is why this story is so important. Everyone knows where they were on 9/11. And if they don't, then they're learning about it for the first time. We had some amazing student matinees where watching that story was so different for that group of kids because they weren't alive.
Right.
Or perhaps they were the 18-year-olds that were born that year. And so they're getting the history lesson. But for the most part, it was people who knew where they were and remembered it. And so everybody has a little nugget of a story or a giant story to tell you. And I met so many amazing people that had been housed in Newfoundland. And there was this girl in Vancouver who came backstage. We were leading a tour, and there was a group that we knew was going to be there. So we were all kind of having a Q&A. And then this girl was kind of lurking in the back corner. And finally someone said, are you waiting for someone? And she goes, no, I grew up in Gander, and I thought this show said it was about it, and I had no idea. And I know Beulah. Like, she just happened to be in town.
Wow.
And happened to come to the show, not realizing that it was people she knew and the stories she knew. I mean, it was that was really exciting and quite flooring because she was so overwhelmed. And I mean, every time I talk about this show, you just the emotions start to swirl because it was such a treasured experience.
Oh, that's so wonderful. And so you got to play among your many characters in the show, Beverly Bass. And what were your interactions with her? And so for people that may not have seen the show, Beverly Bass, who was the first pilot for American Airlines, and she sings the great song "Me in the Sky." And so what was that experience like, getting to interact with her and to play a real person on stage?
Yes, the first time I played a real person on stage was in Beautiful. And so I had just an inch of experience with that, which it's nerve-wracking because you want to honor that person as who they are, but also that person as who they are in the story that's being told. And it's not a very far cry, but you don't want to do impersonations. You want to make sure you've got their spirit, but that you bring your own spin. And luckily, both times I've played someone real, that has been encouraged. I haven't been expected to do everything exactly like they would do it. But Bev was always so supportive, and she still is. She's seen the show so many times. And she's always been so kind. And on a tour, you do a lot of press in each individual city, and she has been so giving with her time to the company and comes and does interviews. And so we had a lot of early mornings together, a lot of car rides together. We did some fun events together. It's been great. And it's funny, I met her before we started rehearsals, which was nice because then I could at least get an idea of who she really was. You can watch all the clips in the world, but to sit across the table from someone makes a difference. And we met for lunch and we did an interview, and she was so lovely. But then the next time I saw her was when we were in rehearsals in New York, and we could barely fit anyone in the rehearsal room because we had the turntable, which took up all the floor. So normally you do a run through before you leave, and your family can come or your friends, and you get a little makeshift audience to cheer you on. But we could barely fit any chairs. So we had our final run through, and this show is very tricky to put together. It is like a Jenga tower, and if you miss the wrong thing, it all comes tumbling down. And so we barely had our brains together, and we're running it for a few friends. And then Bev and Tom came, and that was incredibly nerve-wracking because I barely had a grasp on what I was doing, and I barely knew them, and I wanted to do my best for them. And they were sitting 2 feet in front of me.
Oh, wow.
Every time I picked up the phone to talk to Tom was right there. So I, that was nerve-wracking, but amazing. And they were so kind and supportive. And I remember my cast being very entertained, because anytime I was speaking, they were watching her watch me. And you get those kinds of experiences very often in life, getting to portray someone real. And then, just to have that honor is just, it's been a treat, and I'm so glad she's been so lovely.
Oh, that's so wonderful to hear. Yeah, we were lucky enough to have her speak to our audiences. We had an event before Come From Away came to San Francisco, and she was just the most lovely woman, and she was really wonderful. So it's great to hear that she's that way in real life as well. And so what was it like, what does the song Me in the Sky mean to you, and to perform that song for audiences night after night? And also you performed Me in the Sky with your fellow female cast members at the Women's March here in San Francisco in 2019. And we shared a short video from that yesterday. And what was it like to perform for that crowd?
It was amazing. That was the coolest morning. And to get to do it with the ladies of my company, who are extraordinary women. You're tired on a Saturday morning. In theory, you don't want to get up and wait around and sound check and sing and do all these things, but you do, A. And B, when it's something that amazing, it was the highlight of our stay there for a lot of us. It just was such a cool thing to be a part of. And that song is such an empowering moment for women. And it's such a brilliantly written song that just tells a great tale of how you got to stick with it, and you don't back down, and you're tough, and also about dreams and how they can get taken away. And, for me, singing about flying, I was always singing about theater because I can't fly anything. And I am a happy passenger, and I am fine with that. But I know what it's like to have a dream and to love doing it. And so it was not hard at all to find a connection to that song about chasing your dreams and not giving up. And as far as having it taken away, now it's sort of an interesting time in theater where it's taken away.
Right.
And so, like, reflecting on that is different now. And also, I, for one, when I saw the show, was blown away. Completely blown away. But I had never thought about the pilots. I just hadn't. And so hearing her say the one thing I loved more than anything was used as the bomb, it just punches you in the gut. Maybe other people think of that right away, but I hadn't. I thought of, because I was in New York, and I thought of all of that stuff, and I think of the passengers and just getting the perspective of the people who were stranded, and this pilot who was in charge of them is just so interesting and so important to hear about.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing. And I wonder if you could just, so you said that you were in New York when 9/11 happened. Do you have any memories of what that time was like for you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't forget. I was actually on my way to Philadelphia to start a show. And I remember rolling into the living room with my suitcase, saying goodbye to my roommate, and the news was on, and I remember seeing a building in fire and thinking, oh, something terrible has happened. Okay, I'll see you later. Like, it wasn't what it was at that point.
Right.
And by the time I got to the subway, I lived on 147th, so I got to the 145th Street subway, and everybody was emptying out. And we turned, and there was confusion, and we turned and looked down, and you could see the smoke down Amsterdam all the way at the end of the island. And you couldn't get through on the phones. Cell phones were very different. Couldn't get through on the phones. I was fine, but the air was so weird. When time stops, when something that terrible happens, and everything goes kind of fuzzy. And I got back to the apartment, and I had my friends, but my poor parents couldn't get through on the phone. So eventually they get through on the landline, and everyone knows they're okay. We just basically hunkered down that day, and I ended up going to Philly the next day. So I was gone for the immediate aftermath, but I do remember coming back from Philly in November and it's still being silent.
Mm-hmm.
Everything being quiet, coming out of my normal train station down in Midtown, and there was a giant fireman statue and flowers and flags. You know, it just was so, the air just changed, and everything was different after that.
Right, right. And it's a real, it's so wonderful that we get a piece like Come From Away that really acknowledges those feelings, but also, and then also in turn, lifts up the community at the same time, and shows the strength of humanity that came out of that event.
Yeah, we all love to say definitely that it's a 9/12 story, not a 9/11 story,
Mm-hmm.
because it honors what happened. Am I still there? It said
Yeah.
pause.
Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
we just, you were saying that it was, that you think of the show as a 9/12 story.
Yeah, that it's about the goodness and the love and the caring that can come from something so tragic.
Mm-hmm.
It honors what happened, but it also, just shows us how good we can be to each other,
Right.
and is inspiring in that way.
Right, right. And since we have a couple minutes left here, and I just wanted to ask you a question, because you were here in San Francisco in 2007 for the pre-Broadway production of Legally Blonde, and then you brought the show to, or you were part of the company that you were in Legally Blonde when it opened on Broadway. And what was that experience like to take the show from a pre-Broadway tryout and then move it to Broadway? And do you have any great memories of doing it here in San Francisco?
Yes, it was amazing to be a part of a Broadway show from the beginning, and San Francisco was a treasure. However, I was very glad to go back to San Francisco with Beautiful and Come From Away, but Beautiful for me was a second try, because I had a rough go in San Francisco when I was out of town with Legally Blonde, just personally. I got food poisoning from the opening night party.
No.
I got hit by a car my last week.
Oh.
Like, I couldn't win the first time, and that had nothing to do with San Francisco. But when I went back with Beautiful, I got to explore a little more. We weren't building the show, so we weren't in the theater from, morning till midnight. And so I love being there, because there's so much to do, and the audiences are so great and so smart and so festive.
Yeah.
And so that's always a treat. And yeah, Legally Blonde was such a learning experience for me to build something from the ground. I was covering 3 roles, and just how all of that works was a new thing for me. And there's so much that goes into it that you don't see, the changes, the cuts, the very long rehearsals, and then all of a sudden that song is gone anyway, and press and costumes that get fit for you and then thrown out, and there are so many interesting parts. And it was such a fun show, and it did so much for me. I was a part of it overall for almost 5 years. I did it on tour after Broadway, so it was a huge part of my life, and I'm very thankful for it.
Oh, that's great to hear, and I'm glad that you got your second chance with Beautiful, which we loved here. And yeah, I just wanted to ask you, so now that you're teaching and working with the younger generation, what is some advice that you would give your younger self, who maybe was just starting out on her path?
Be yourself, be your best self, and have fun. Know that there are so many different ways to succeed, and ultimately, if you are doing your best and sharing your heart and your passion and being kind, you're successful. I think it's so easy to think about keeping score, and I think that is the wrong reason to drive your life. I think that the more you can share and include and give and help and have fun, because I don't think anyone gets in theater to be serious. I think we get into theater because we love it, and so don't forget why you got into theater, and try to share that love. Yeah,
it's really great. And I wonder if you could just share just a little bit about your education path, and so you're originally from Minnesota, correct? And how did you first discover musical theater, and what led you to where you are today? I know that we have a lot of aspiring actors and actresses who are watching.
Yeah, yeah, of course. So, I grew up in Minnesota, and my dance instructors growing up, which I started dance in fourth grade so that I could audition for Annie. Um, they had lived in New York. She was a ballerina. He was in Bob Fosse's original shows. He was in Sweet Charity, Damn Yankees. So they had some great cred, and they were also I just adore them, Eddie and Kathy Gasper, and they also had good tough love. So I was able to get some good training and get a little bit of a tough skin, and I became completely obsessed with musicals as soon as I knew what they were. I mean, I'd watched all the musical movies, and then I listened to the original cast recordings, and then I would see tours that would come through, whether it was up in Grand Forks in North Dakota or if it was in the Twin Cities in Minnesota. And then I went to a open call in Detroit when I was a sophomore in high school, where they were looking for the replacement for Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz with on the tour with Mickey Rooney and Eartha Kitt. And I became the Detroit finalist. And they were going to have a final callback. They ended up putting the show on hiatus and then not putting it back out. So we never had our callback. We never know who got it. It didn't matter. But I had already prepared to graduate early from high school in case I got the part. So I left high school a year early. I didn't leave it. I graduated. But I had been very involved there in all the shows, in speech and debate. My wonderful high school drama teacher. I'm sure if there are any kids watching, you have your drama teacher. Mine is Rebecca Meyer-Larson, and I love her. And I had a great summer program growing up at Trollwood Performing Arts School where we did giant musicals outdoors. So I had a lot of experience, but of course, none of it, nothing compares to New York. So I jumped in and I moved to New York and I started auditioning, started taking voice lessons, taking dance classes. And I was lucky. I booked the national tour of Peter Pan after I was there for only a couple weeks.
Oh, wow.
And so then I had my first job and I rehearsed and I traveled, and it all just, once you start going in New York and you start meeting people and trying and putting yourself out there, there's always stuff to be found and always stuff to do. You just have to stick with it.
Right.
So I did skip the college thing, but it wasn't because I didn't want to go. I would still love to go to college. But at that point, that was the path that was available to me, and my parents were luckily supportive, and I'm thankful that it turned out.
Right, yeah. And then here you are about to teach your skills to the next generation, and to really instill some joy and some theater in some kids. So I know you got to run. Thank you so much, Becky, for taking the time to talk to us.
Of course. Thank you. And thanks everybody for tuning in. Have a good day.
Thanks, you too.